Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in the Bondage of the Will by Martin Luther, dated 1525. We're going to take a little detour here. We're going to take a look at the context of church history that surrounded Martin Luther and the councils that were important for the time of around 1525. And so if you look at the chart, we're going to begin with 325 AD and the Council of Nicaea. And that was the time when the heresy of Arianism rose up. And Arius said that Christ is not co-eternal and not co-substantial with the Father. Athanasius challenged that and said that Christ is both co-eternal and co-substantial with the Father, and that was the final decision of the Council of Nicaea, and that became a formal declaration of the Arianism as heresy. And then in 412 AD, there was the Council of Carthage, and this is the big one that really was influential as far as Martin Luther was concerned. Pelagius denied the fallen nature of man. He denied original sin. And man does not have a fallen free will. That's what he said. But Augustine posited the doctrine of the fallen nature of mankind, including a fallen free will. This became the declaration of the council, and they declared Pelagianism as heresy. But something happened which was very important, and that's at the same time, 412 AD, Pope Zosimus issued a papal bull, and he condemned the Council of Carthage, and he said that the Catholic Church would side with Pelagianism. And this continued for years, all the way up until the time of Luther. The Pelagian heresy was being affirmed by the Catholic Church, which created a kind of a works righteousness, and that's, of course, what Luther encountered in 1525. But it continued all the way up into the 1700s. Pope Clement XI also upheld the Pelagian heresy. So that was the big one that really confronted Martin Luther in the 1500s. The fact that the Catholic Church was selling forgiveness of sins and based it on a works righteousness and a heresy of Pelagianism. So it continued up until the time of the Reformation. And then we reach 1524 to 1525, and that's where we pick up the Erasmus-Luther controversy. Erasmus wrote the diatribe concerning free will. He stated that free will is not fallen. It was called the synergistic heresy, from sin for together and ergon is work. So synergistic means working together, and he said that man and God work together for salvation. Synergistic heresy. It was countered by Luther, and the book we're going through, The Bondage of the Will. Luther said man must be born again, quickened in the Spirit, in order to have faith. This is the monergistic theory, the monergistic doctrine, that we are saved by grace alone. We don't have a cooperation with God to reach salvation. It's God alone, through His grace, that provides salvation. So it was the synergistic heresy versus monergistic doctrine of Luther. But then just 20 years later, in 1545, in the Council of Trent, Pope Paul III declared that after the sin of Adam, man's free will is not fallen. Well, that's Pelagian heresy again. So it crept back up just 20 years after Luther. And that was considered to be infallible truth. And this continued, and we finally get to 1610 to 1619, and a document was issued by the followers of Arminius. It was called the Remonstrance Document of 1610, and it was the heresy of semi-Pelagianism, and it said that man cooperates with God for salvation. In other words, works righteousness again. You have to continually work with your priest to achieve salvation. You have to continue to work with the Catholic Church and the Catholic hierarchy. You have to enter into that cooperative work together in order to reach salvation. So its works righteousness gets reaffirmed. Then the all-important answer by the Reformation, the Council of Dort in 1618, rejected Arminianism by affirming the fallen nature of man and the unconditional election of man for salvation. In other words, it was Calvinism that was posited at the Council of Dort, because the Remonstrance document had 5 points. And so the Council of Dort countered with 5 opposing points. That became later known as 5-point Calvinism. And that held up the Reformed doctrine. So Luther's environment was really an environment that was, he felt, by facing Erasmus, he was facing a resurgence of Pelagian heresy, and that Pelagian heresy he was determined to counter and to put down. And so he considered Erasmus's diatribe concerning the free will to be absolutely reasserting the heresy by Pelagius of 412 AD. And that's why for Luther, he was an Augustinian monk, but he upholds Augustine. He upholds Augustine against Erasmus. He said, Augustine posited the doctrine of fallen nature of man. And we decided in the Council of Carthage, the church did decide against Pelagius, and here you are, Erasmus, raising up this heresy again with your synergistic heresy that man and God work together for salvation. Works righteousness, Pelagian heresy. And so it's all about, for Luther, it's all about the resurgence of the heresy from Pelagius. It's all about the denial of original sin. Luther says we must uphold the doctrine of original sin. Man is fallen in his human nature. The doctrine of original sin is orthodox doctrine of Orthodox Christianity. Luther is claiming that Erasmus is reasserting Pelagian heresy by his synergistic heresy in his diatribe concerning free will, that man and God work together and that the free will is not fallen in mankind. And Luther absolutely denies this, emphatically denies this. But this gives us the picture of the church councils surrounding Martin Luther. And now you understand why the last lesson we talked about original sin and Pelagian heresy, because Luther looked at Erasmus as reasserting Pelagian heresy. That's his position. He says, Erasmus, you are taking up a heresy that the church has already put down. You're reasserting Pelagian heresy. So this gives us our context, and basically today we're situated post-Council of Dort of 1618, where Arianism was rejected by the church, affirming the nature of mankind, affirming original sin, and reaffirming Reformed doctrine, which now is known as 5-point Calvinism. Today it's called 5-point Calvinism, and there are various versions of that, of course. But this little detour gives us just a quick little glance at the surrounding church history specific to Martin Luther, and we're going to close this out, and we will pick up with our next lesson now, pages 49 to 64. So we'll close this out and pick up with our next lesson.